What's up everyone, here at Table Rock Lake, early spring, catching fish on one of my favorite baits in the world to throw, and that's a Spromic stick. You know, there's a lot of things that come into play when you start talking about throwing a stick bait, a jerk bait. A lot of people refer to them two ways. But the whole thing is having the right conditions, fishing it at the right time, having the right rod and reel line set up, and you can have more fun catching them on a jerk bait, in my opinion, than almost any other bait you want to throw. You know, basically, I mean, when you think about what a jerkbait is, jerkbait, stick bait, whatever, however you want to refer to it, I mean, it's a minnow style bait that is made to imitate or replicate really any forage fish, in my opinion, that bass feed on, or not just bass, I mean, any species of fish. I know at some lakes where there's a good crappie population that I really feel like crappie, brim, minnows, any type of forage that bass feed on, a jerkbait really can imitate. I mean, you get up north, yellow perch, and all of the different variations of alewives and everything that you've got that those fish feed on, a jerkbait is definitely one of those baits that can imitate anything and everything when it comes to that. That fish was 18 or 20 foot of water. I mean, I'm basically just fishing out off of a long extended bar that runs out, and the creek channel just basically swings right up against the end of it. And I mean, it's a place that these fish can access quick. They can pull up on this thing, and they can do everything they want to do here. They can feed here, they can spawn here, they can really just be here until they're done spawning and ready to move back out, you know, and get in their post-spawn or even summer pattern. You know, springtime leading into the spawn right now, but a jerkbait is a bait that you can really catch them on pretty much 12 months of the year anymore. Whenever I'm looking for the right conditions to throw a jerkbait, I mean, I generally don't want to go out and throw a jerkbait immediately on a bright, slick, calm day. But generally when you get enough breeze that you've got a ripple, you've got just enough turbulence on the water to break the surface up, I mean, a jerkbait generally comes into play. It's just a bait that you can cover a lot of water with. You can seek out those fish that you can visibly see on forward-facing sonar, but it's a bait that you can just cover water and generate bites. Typically the largemouths, they want to be closer to timber. They want to be around big rock, things like that. But smallmouth, and this is a spot, I thought it would be a smallmouth out here on this long flat point, but generally your spots and your smallmouth are going to be out here on the points. Occasionally you'll catch a largemouth, especially if there's some brush. But a big old fat spot like that goes a long way. He just barely got it. Look at that. That's another reason those gamakatsu hooks are so important. Beautiful fish. I mean, look how fat they are. They are ready to go to the bank. You know, points are always a good go-to for throwing a jerkbait. And again, windy points is probably my #1 go-to. But a jerkbait's a bait that you can catch fish out over, you know, 80, 90 foot of water if they're suspended in the right area of the water column. Typically when I make a cast with a jerkbait, I wind it down first, and then it becomes just a stop and go. I mean, you're pausing it for a little bit, you might hit it 2 times, 3 times, let it sit there for a minute. And you know, I'm always looking for that bait on my live scope just to see if I've got anything trailing it. And just fishing it along, just keeping it moving, keeping it coming, and that way if there is anything behind it, or you know, I'm getting any interest from anybody, I can slow it down, speed it up, do whatever I need to do to trigger that fish to bite. Had to slow it down. He finally came up there and got it. Little bitty one, but that's the thing about a jerkbait. I mean, it's one of those baits that you can absolutely, I mean, of any bait that you can go out and I really feel like you can get 50, 60 bites a day on. When they get on a jerkbait good, I mean, it is that bait that you can just catch a lot of fish on. We started up on some shallower points, and I was throwing the original 110, but I just pulled out the 110+1. That PM Twilight seemed to be really getting some reactions from them up on those shallow points. So now I'm sitting out here 16, 18, 20 foot of water, throwing that deeper diver, trying to see if there's some bigger fish laying out here a little bit farther off some of these points. That's what we're looking for right there. The whole thing about it, I mean, when you're throwing a jerkbait, it's just all about getting somewhere where you get a little bit of surface disturbance just to break the surface up. And I mean, generally takes a little bit of a ripple to make it happen. And I mean, you can see old largemouth ate that dude good. When I'm looking for key places to fish a jerkbait, I'm generally always trying to find areas where I've got deep water closer to what would be adjacent to spawning flats. I mean, this is a good spawning cove right here. I mean, this water up here in the red is actually less than 5 foot. But you can see that the contours are real steep right there close to that 5 foot, and it's 20, 25 foot deep right out here off of that. So those are the key kind of places that I'm looking for. And I'm generally gonna start on the point and work my ways into the pocket. Just absolutely smoked it. I slowed it down just a little bit and I actually changed baits. I really thought I started seeing some fish out here a little bit deeper on some of these points, and I thought maybe that +1 was gonna be the one to go with, but pulled out the old 110 original PM Twilight again, and it's amazing even on a sunny day how sometimes that PM Twilight, as loud and as obnoxious as it is, how good it'll actually catch them. I mean, you know, one thing about it, when it comes to stick bait fishing, you want to make sure that you're throwing a bait that is reaching the proper depth and doing the proper thing. The original 110 McStick is a bait that was built to be a cold water bait, a suspending bait, a bait that you could utilize when the water temperatures were below 60 degrees, when the fish were lethargic. It's built to set in the water column, so when you pull the bait down and stop it, it's gonna set right there in the water column. It's not gonna float back up, and that's a real key when you're trying to catch those fish in colder water temperatures. But then when you get into those seasons where the fish are up shallow, they're up there on the bank, they're chasing forage on the surface, that's when baits like the 115 and the 95 really shine. I mean, these are baits that you can fish closer to the surface. These are floater divers. They're built to dive down and then float back up. So anytime those fish are shallow and you're trying to target them in that surface to 4 or 5 foot depth zones, the McStick 115 and 95 are probably the baits you want to look at doing that with. Then we've got baits like the McStick 85 and the 110+1 are both baits designed to fish when the fish are deeper in the water column. When they're on bait that is 15, 18, 20, 25 foot deep, the 85 and the 110+1 are the baits that you really want to utilize to get to those fish. Forward-facing sonars but definitely made jerkbait fishing a lot easier because we literally can pull up to places now and truly see that there's fish in those brush piles or standing timber or whatever it is that we might be fishing. I mean, like right there is a perfect example. I mean, you can see that fish, I mean, it's just not pinned to the bottom. It's kind of coming up and hovering off the bottom a little bit. There's my jerkbait right there coming into the shot. And you can see a lot of times the drawing power. I mean, I really believe there's times that I can draw fish out of 25 foot of water, maybe sometimes more if the clarity's good enough to get a jerkbait that's only 10 or 12 foot under the surface. I mean, basically we pulled up here on another one of those long underwater bars and finally got one to come up off the bottom and get it. He ain't as big as I thought he was. I think he just hooked funny. When a fish gets the bait, you really don't want to set the hook hard. It's more just kind of lean into him and wind and pull, and your hookup rates usually go up a lot better. You know, that's one of the things about a jerkbait. When fish are really slapping at a bait, when they're not eating the bait good, I mean, this is one of those baits that you can definitely have a lot better odds of putting a few more of those fish in the boat. I mean, that's a legal fish as long as he's actually tried to eat the bait. And with all those super sharp gamakatsu trebles on there, you're gonna catch a bunch of them by accident, even on a jerkbait. You know, how do you decide what colors you're gonna throw? And I mean, I've got 2 or 3 rules of thumb. I mean, the biggest thing about it for me, the more dark the day is, the more turbulence there is, more of an opaque solid color or flashy chrome colored bait. If I'm fishing clear water, light wind days, I want to throw the most translucent baits I can throw. Something that's almost completely see-through. It's got color, it looks like a shad, it looks like, you know, a forage fish. And those are the kind of colors I want to throw on those bright, sunny, low wind days. You know, another thing that you really want to take into consideration when you're throwing a jerkbait is the rod, the reel, the line. And if I'm throwing a jerkbait in, you know, in the mid 40s, low 40s, I'm typically going to throw a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel. But as the water temperature warms up, I'm definitely going to increase the gear ratio. I mean, I'm going to go to a 6/8 to 1 gear ratio reel. And the reason you want to up speed your reel as the water temperature warms up, because when these fish, as the water temperature warms and these fish get more aggressive, you just can't hardly catch up with them. When you're catching them in that 40-degree water, that 5-to-1 gear ratio reel's all you need because they just don't have a lot of fire in them. I'm always typically going to throw the same rod. I mean, I generally throw a 6/8 Falcon jerkbait rod, and that's what I generally throw my jerkbait on throughout the year. Occasionally when I go up north, if I'm fishing for smallmouth, I'm wanting to make extremely long casts, I might go to a 7-foot, but you want a rod that's a medium action, something that's got a fast, soft tip. So when a fish grabs that bait, the rod can give to him a little bit. And then when it comes to line, really line is all about how deep you want your bait to go. I mean, I'm generally going to throw anywhere from 8 to 16, and typically it's 8, 10, and 12 go to all the time for me. I like Sunline FC crank. It's a reaction-based line. It's a line that's got a lot of stretch built into it. And when you're throwing a jerkbait, you want to put action in the bait, but you don't want to put too much action in the bait. And you also want a line that's got some stretch in it, so when a fish gets it, not only it allows him to get the bait better, but when you're fighting the fish, the odds of losing that fish become a lot less likely. You can catch a ton of fish if you put a jerkbait in your hand, cover some water, whether you're using live scope or not, fish the right depths, and you can get it done.